right. Good morning, PT on Ice. It is August 5th, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. My name is Mike Eisenhart, and I am here to wish everyone well. I'm going to start the clock and get started, see if a few people sign on this morning, but going to go ahead and jump right into it. Hey, Sean, welcome. All right, so it is Monday, and that means today is Monday with Pop, and I'm happy to be here as the host. And today is a bit of a bittersweet moment for me. It's one of those times where these kinds of moments happen, and one that I want to make sure that I address fully, and that is my farewell on PT on Ice. This will be my final episode of PT on Ice. I will no longer be here on Mondays, and I wanted to just kind of if the world would allow to indulge just a bit of a few minutes to say goodbye and to have a nice farewell. So I promise it still won't take more than 15 minutes, and I do have the clock going. So I thought, over the last couple of weeks, we've had a few changes and things that are going to take the paths in different directions. A bit of a divergence. And so what I've been spending some time over the last couple of days just thinking about, what that is and what that means. And the poem that kept coming up, and I've talked about this a little bit in the past. The Road Less Traveled, which is one of my favorite poems of all time, Robert Frost. And so what I found myself doing was a little bit of a dueling banjos kind of scenario. I'd sort of think about a verse and then sort of think about where things went. And so that's what I'm gonna share with you today. So two roads diverged in the yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other just as fair, and having perhaps a better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. If you know that poem, you know that Robert Frost is describing this point in his journey where he gets to this crossroads, this difficult decision, this time to say, well, here I am with two amazing choices, two paths to travel, but I can only travel one. I'm just one traveler. And they both look good, and neither is worn, neither is broken down. They both look to be high adventure. And maybe take me somewhere. And in many ways, that's where I'm at with my career. For me, the only difference is that instead of two roads, it's been four roads over the last 3 years. Just kind of to look back, those who may not know this part of the story, for 16, 18 years, we had toiled in the lab here at Proactivity, working on this idea of upstream care, working on this concept of prevention, and really trying to prove that it works. So that was pretty much my job. I just kind of went after it and did it every day, and really didn't talk about it much or share much about it. I just kind of did my thing. And the reason why is because I just didn't think that PTs in general were into it. I just didn't ever see therapists getting past the idea of being the rehab folks, the after the fact folks. And of course that those two things go a little bit at odds. And so I just kind of had thrown my hands up and said, yeah, we'll just do it, and we'll do it here in our lab. All went well. Fast forward until about June-ish 2016, and that was kind of a big time for me as a professional because I had a lot going on, right? A couple of other roads had now come into my life. It was the first time that I was really getting recognized for some of this. I was the state chapter president in APTA at the time. And they had started to really push the conversation forward. I was asked to present at a couple of places, including the State Payment Policy Forum and the Insurers Forum or Payers Forum or something. And it was really the first time that I was ever going to share any of our team's data. At around that same time, I met Gene and Jeff, and they asked me to come on and do a masterminds group, which was like an online forum, very similar to like any of the various mastermind groups. And I talked about this idea of Physical Therapist 2.0. And that was in June of 2016. And it kind of struck a chord with the group. And I can remember getting tweets after sometime in June 2016 and people saying, that they were fired up about this. And I was really excited about it because I just didn't think that there was much of an appetite. At that point, Jeff had reached out to me and said, hey, I think there's something here. We ought to try to put a course together. I think you can get this in front of people, and I think people want this. I think they're longing for this. And although I didn't believe it, I didn't. I said, well, I don't think so. I've been talking about this for a long time at some level, and there's very little response. He said, no, I think there is. And so that conversation started. A couple of months later, in September 2016, I had maybe 5 to 7 people, including some misfits, right, who are now my business partners, Aaron Perez, show up at base camp. I see Jason on there. He was part of that conversation in many ways. Alan was the first time I met Alan. He and Leor, who was a New Jersey native, showed up, and I fondly remember starting the meeting late. We were going to start at like 8 or 8:30. We started the meeting late because Leor and Alan were committed. They were absolutely committed to getting a proper New Jersey breakfast, which we did not offer at the time. And if you read between the lines, that was a highly processed breakfast sandwich on a bagel. And we didn't have that at the Fuel Good Cafe. We had something that was more like oatmeal and related. So that was a funny time. So they showed up, and I can remember having all sorts of conversations in what we were calling a PT 2.0 salon. Where we just traded ideas and had a nice talk and kind of let the creative juices flow. Out of that, just a lot came. And that was in June. And then by September, the APTA had asked me to present at this conference. And then the state of Georgia picked up this message by urging of Perry Brubaker. And it was like all of a sudden, me who's used to toiling in the lab and just kind of trying to get the job done every day and figure out how we're going to bring this new way of caring, this upstream concept, this get and keep people healthy and out of the gears of the healthcare system. I was like sort of thrust into the limelight. And it's not a place that I'm super comfortable with in some aspects of my life. Since then, it's been multiple universities, and it's been lectures from coast to coast, and it's been 100 people trained through ICE in the certification program, and then there's this whole other bucket which sort of grew out of the nonprofit side of our business, the Basecamp 31 side, known as the APHPT. And so that all has happened in 3 years, and it's been a wild 3 years. But as paths sometimes do, after 3 years, paths sometimes diverge. And that's kind of where we found ourselves in the last couple of months. And now we're at a point where I'm sort of at that traveling point. You sort of have to make a choice. And I really have Jeff to thank in many ways because just as in June of 2016, he was kind enough to embrace this message and say, hey, why don't we pull it into this megaphone? Now it's a point where he's nudging me out of the nest a little bit and telling me, hey, travel that path. And I think that it will ultimately be a very, very good thing. And so what I'm finding is an amazing energy associated with it. And that's something that I have anybody who's watched this podcast and Mondays with Pop, which if you remember way back when was Fridays. Talk about how brash we came from F me. That's what I called it. Fridays with Mike Eisenhart. And then we switched the schedule around. It became Mondays with Pop. And so all of that kind of swirling and whirling, including multiple work groups for the APTA, and my first published paper came out this month in the flagship journal of the American Physical Therapy Association, PTJ. I was honored, to see that Alan Jetty, who is a remarkable person, the editor, editorialized our article. And for me, as the if you can stand the indulgence, for me as the only non-academician on that author group, to be included with really, really bright minds on the topic of upstream and population care, to have that published at PTJ. These are things that never in a million years did I ever think I would see for my career. And so what it comes down to is that the work is nowhere near done. It is not even close. In many ways, I feel like it's just beginning, and it's just beginning anew, and that there's a 3-year journey still the next 3 years. What will 2019 plus 3 bring, for all of us who are in this space trying to figure out how to get and keep people healthy, how to keep them out of the gears of a healthcare system, which, as we know, politically, if you follow any of the political discourse, you know it is an absolute mess. How are we going to, to embrace the fact that Americans are distressed, that at the root of many of the evils we see every single day, including, in my opinion, some of the absolute atrocities that we see, is a population of people who are distressed, that they are breaking, and they're breaking because their physical health doesn't support their mental health, and their mental health doesn't allow them to function, and that function is breaking down. So we're there. We're there. We're at a point where we have to recognize that society is distressed, and that we, if we stand by, are not doing our job. We're not adding the value that we can. And so what that means is that, I have to kind of go back to the lab and roll up the sleeves. It doesn't mean that I'll stop lecturing and teaching. I couldn't be more humbled and excited that this fall I'll be in North Carolina giving a keynote, and Florida asked me to come out and talk about some of this craziness, and I'll be in Massachusetts talking about innovation. I mean, these are things that, I would have never in a million dreamed of for myself. But what it says to me is that as a profession, we're starting to realize exactly what this means for us. It means a very steep uphill climb. It means that we have to really, assume the roles that we, sort of where we belong. We belong in a role that's much, much higher because we can help that distress. We can help that society is on fire, that the bodies, the biology, and definitely the mental health is on fire. I brought this conversation up with the APTA board of directors a bit ago, and I said, I am stoked, and I honestly, I feel at some little tiny level responsible, for urging, if nothing else, just yelling a lot from the back of the room, that population health and employer health needs to be at the top of our agenda. And I couldn't tell you how amazing it was, after never in a million years believing that would be the case, to see it front and center on the strategic plan at the APTA. So what does this all mean in my 3 minutes left? It means that although roads diverge, and I will no longer be sitting as faculty for ICE, and the population health track that I've helped build with Allie and Jeremy and Megan and others, that will be moving full-time under the APHPT hood, where that can be the sole focus. And that will start after this current course. So we've got a course starting up. The intro course is starting up, and that'll be the last time we run it under the ICE hood. And then from there, those roads will diverge a bit. But what it ultimately means is that the messaging and the fight and the goal has never changed and really won't. Couple of things before I run out of time. One, just know that for me, this comes down to our collective will. Our collective will to pick our heads up and look around and realize that the world is on fire, and that we can help it. We may not be able to solve it. In fact, we definitely can't solve it by ourselves, but we can help it. And yeah, Steve, I'm with you. We should be on the front of that arrow. We should be lead goose when it's our time to fly, and we should fly hard. And so that that is, it's time for that. We are there. We've got to do it. And guys like me have to find out how to sort of pick our heads up and be willing to get where we should be on it. And that's what over the next 3 years I hope will happen. So the good news is, don't worry, I'm not getting in the race for president. But what I am doing is I'm just simply saying that I'm doubling down on the effort. And that you will continue to hear this message from me and from anybody else who is willing to put some time, energy, effort, money into it. To hear more about it, if it's something you're interested in, I'll make a quick plug, aphpt.org/townhall. Next Wednesday, we'll talk about that organization, that nonprofit organization, that group of therapists where in many ways professionally, it's kind of like, I describe it as like, that home where the key is under the mat. You know that Sunday dinner's at 8 and you can just show up and bring all your warts and all your crazy ideas and just show up, and people around you, around the table, are going to support you. That's sort of what that forum is. That forum is continuing to grow. And it's a growth that I 100% support, and the leaders there are ready to do. So they're going to talk more about that. But I'll just leave you, before I finish the Robert Frost poem in my 27 seconds, I'll leave you with what we say on the proactivity side. Something that I look at every single day when I enter our building, and I think it's absolutely critical. If we care enough, family, to do the right thing, integrity, and take down barriers to help others achieve leadership, we can change the world, freedom, even if only one person at a time. So thank you for indulging me. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Today is only Monday. Remember, there are many more Mondays to come. I urge you, and I thank you. Make it count.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.